Yep, recording started.
Perfect.
Awesome, awesome. Well, joining today's deep dive, we're super excited to be talking about API and the foundations we need to be AI ready so we can leverage this. My name is Karina. I'm going to move forward and we'll talk a little bit about some housekeeping right before we dive in. So, as you guys know, you have the chat. I'm joining you guys from DC. And we have a huge international crowd today. Just quick housekeeping, stay respectful. Let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to join us. We'll try to answer your questions as soon as possible. Now, if we move forward to our next slides. You may not be comfortable being recorded, whether it's by speaking or within our recording. You're feel free to hop off if you don't, but always know that you do have this session to look back at. But if you're okay, then we'll move forward and we'll continue recording the session for other members to be able to tune in. As we continue, I want to let you guys know, if you love our deep dives, which I hope you guys do, you guys can always and get access to every deep dive we have moving forward. And then as we get close to wrapping up, we'll go to the next slide, please, Taryn. Just want to let you guys know, if you haven't submitted already there, so definitely a good opportunity to meet additional champs. If you like this session, you can with Chris, I, or Tyron. But also join us for other session as some of our speakers, champion program will be there from all of our products. And now, with no further ado, I will get started in the introductions. So I'm Karina. I'm the moderators for today. I am a Marketo Adobe champ. I'm also from there, super excited. And I've also been part of the Experience Makers Awards top 3. So very excited for that. I'll pass this over now to Charlie so he can give you more of his background, and then we'll transition to Chris as well.
Wow, how to follow that. Hi, everybody. I'm Charlie Oakham. I'm Chief Marketing Technologist here at JTF. I'm over in EMEA. I also lead a MUG group, the Virtual EMEA Marketo User Group. So please do also check that out. There's a lot of chat there around APIs, as well as Dynamics Salesforce, and of course, Marketo. Chris, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you both. My name is Chris Kelly. I am at Qualified Digital as the Director of Marketing Automation, focusing primarily in Marketo. Third year as a Marketo champ, was able to be the leader of this deep dive community last year, so very happy to come back and speak again.
Perfect. Now we'll transition to the agenda. We do have a very packed agenda, but it's definitely set up to make sure that if there's anyone joining us today who may be getting an introductory into APIs, we'll run you guys down that stream so you can get an understanding of what API are, how they function, and then we'll start to speak a little bit more of how you can leverage them, what its functionalities are, and then we'll transition to Charlie's and Chris giving us examples of how their organizations are leveraging it. And then some cool little tokens for after the session to understand how you guys can get AI fluent or ready with some out-of-the-box use cases that we have in Marketo. So now we'll continue on and start getting straight into the session.
All right. So first of all, we want to give a fairly well-rounded grounding. What is an API? How do you use it? How do you get going with the API? So in general, an API is just a way for you to communicate with outside applications. So the application programming interface, it's all going to be the same. Once you learn one API, it's fairly straightforward with all the others. There's just specific details that you need to find based off of documentation. And that's one thing I do want to call out here is there is documentation for all of this. So if you feel like, hey, I missed something during this communication, or hey, there's not enough detail specifically in these decks, this is a very wide, very broad topic. So please feel free to as part of this deck, there are links, please use them. There's a lot more detail in there. So if you're missing something, ask us questions or check out the documentation. We'll be happy to answer them. But it's how Marketo sends and receives any data or updates to the database within Marketo. And it allows Marketo to sync leads, any activities, if you have custom objects, if you have a CRM integration, all of that uses API to communicate back and forth. That's how Marketo does what it needs to do. Triggering smart campaigns programmatically, both internally and externally, and then allowing for real-time integrations, like I said. But why APIs specifically matter? It's because if you're trying to do everything within the UI, you have known probably going through this that there are certain limitations that the AI itself, the UI itself, does not allow you to actually change this specific action or update data quickly enough, or handle duplications or mass uploads, things like that, things that you really need for scalability, repeatability, and things like that. So APIs are a very, very powerful tool once you start playing around with them. Next one, please. Perfect. So there's a couple of pieces of information to get you started. Specifically, how do you set up an API? How do you set up access for that API user, and making sure that they don't have access to information that they shouldn't? So one thing that we need to really call out here is that how Marketo sets up APIs is actually through a user. So you go through the same process of creating a Marketo user, but in this case, you can specifically say, I want it to be an API only user, meaning it doesn't have like a security issue. If you're trying to sign in as that API user and get around Marketo, you can't do that. So that is one of the things of making sure that you are really clarifying what that user has access to. So you can do that in the users and roles, specifically calling out that's an API. And then you go into launch point. And then in launch point, you can say, I want to create a new connector. And then as you can see here on the right-hand side, you create a new service. You can call it whatever you wish. Best practices are specifically what that API is meant to connect to. So for example, a CRM, or if you're using it as like a make API connection. So your display name tells you what it is inside of Marketo. Usually it's going to be a custom because the service is available. Marketo has some out of the box, but usually you're going to be creating your own. So that's a custom. And then from there, you can see API only user. That's where that previously created user comes into play. And you can specify which user you want to use for what use case. And then this is the big piece that a lot of people might not notice, is the client ID and secret keys. These can be found within Marketo admin section as well. And it is used to specifically say, I am who I say I am to the outside world. I am Chris Kelly. I do have authentication and permissions to use or access inside of Marketo. That is what you're able to use. So you need to have both a client ID and a secret key in order to authenticate whenever you're making an API call. And then again, this is really built for audit and scale. So making sure that you have a clean activity log, you're able to develop faster, and required for the foundation of AI and automation. So the API calls happen when you're not around. You can set up programs to do that for you. And even outside of needing a window or anything like that, it all happens automatically for you if you want to go that direction. Charlie, is there anything you would like to add here?
We're going to show you actually what you do with those pieces of information. That client secret, your user, and most importantly as well, your munchkin. So if you guys don't know what your munchkin ID is, you can very quickly find it if you're logged into Marketo. It's in the top. It's a 6-digit, 9-digit, I can't remember off the top of my head, number that you, or code that you need to sort of throw into those services, because it's important that you're calling your instance and not someone else's.
So thank you, Charlie. So here's some screen captures of what I was describing before, going into launch point. And you can either check out some existing, so example REST service is an existing. If you wanted to create a new one, all you have to do is hit that new in the top left there. And then if you click on details, this is where you can find the client ID and client secret, which will allow you to make your API calls to get started. So if there's any questions about that, there's documentation here. There's a link that walks you through the entire process, where to find things, why it's important. Again, this documentation goes into so much more detail than we possibly could during this presentation. So please feel free.
And I'm guessing either Chris or Charlie deleted this API user after sharing the client ID and client secret, because you should never expose those.
That is true. Yes, do not share this. This is very important information. I actually took these screenshots from the Adobe documentation itself. So don't feel like this is a breach in any way, but yes, that is a great call out, Tyrone.
I'll pick this up, Chris. So there are different ways as well that you can use that information within and external to Marketo. So we're going to cover off a couple of use cases. You guys may have heard of webhooks and how you can use those webhooks within sort of flows. And you also might have heard of self-service flow steps. So as we go through the presentation, we'll sort of explain the two different things. But we'll also explain as well what the difference is between sort of get and post. Because a lot of, particularly when we talk about external services, you can use external services and your API key to get information out of Marketo, but then also push it or post it back in, which is great when we're talking about getting ready for things like AI and some of these use cases around transforming data, because AI needs to be able to get data out of your Marketo instance in a format that it understands, and it needs to push it back in. It needs to push back in whatever it's cleaning, whatever it's summarizing, whatever it's trying to do in your Marketo instance. So we're going to talk about those sort of two things today. And I think, Chris, would you like to just talk about Postman? Because I love Postman as a tool. And if Tony, you kick on the slide, I think we can just show you how you can get started very simply with the API using this tool.
Absolutely. So if you've never heard of Postman, Postman is an application that allows you to make API calls without really needing to know any type of command line interface or needing to do any type of coding or what have you. And it allows you to do some drop downs. Here's an example of what a Postman interface looks like, and we'll walk you through everything that you need to do in order to make a successful API call. So why Postman specifically? Well, it allows you to test against your interface without, again, writing code, and validate that you have the correct information that you need in order to start your processes at a higher level, automation and things like that. So this is you as a human still interacting and making sure that your API calls are set up correctly. And then actually learning API is great too, because it will give you back some error codes if you're not doing it correctly, or just allow you to understand how the API from the documentation actually comes into real life, getting your hands on keyboard and everything. It's really great. So let's talk about the basic Marketo API request. So a request is either going to be, like Charlie was talking about, a get, which means I am asking from information from Marketo. And you can do all sorts of things. There's an entire page dedicated to everything that you can do within the Marketo API. So you can ask for all of the lead records, you can ask for activities, you can ask for emails or what type of programs are available. Again, all of this is very detailed inside the documentation. But the understanding here that we need to get across is that you can do 4 different activities. You can do a get, which is requesting information. You can do a post, which is putting information into a different location, or you can put information into Marketo where it's saying, I want to update content, I want to put new data into Marketo, or you can delete content. So sounds very basic, but it allows you to do quite a wide range of activities. And again, the documentation goes into much more detail. But on the right-hand side here, you can see that there's a get call, and that it's actually a drop-down, so you can choose, I want to do a get. And then the URL here, this is kind of the technical piece where you as the user need to follow the Marketo documentation, and it will tell you exactly where to find it. But it's saying, I want to make a specific request to a specific location, and it's saying here, I want to do marketorest.com. So that's part of learning how this is the direction I'm calling this specific location. And then it's doing a /lead. So it's saying, I am going to update the leads. I want to get information from the lead. And then you can see that 18100, that's the specific ID that you're wanting to pull back. So it goes through and it says, this is what I want to accomplish. This is how I want to do it. And then the other thing that we need to talk about, so that's number 2, is setting up your request and everything. And then number 3 is saying, I need to do an authorization token. This is for security reasons. Marketo is going to say, hey, are you who you say you are? So the first thing that you need to do is an authentication call before you start going into the rest of the API. So once you have been authenticated, it gives you back information saying, here's your authentication key, your authentication token. And that token is essentially allowing you to just continue on and ask request for information, upload information, delete information. But you have to have that authentication handled first. Otherwise, Marketo is going to say, I'm not going to let you do this. I don't know who you are. So it's very important. And then what does Postman help you confirm? The API permissions are correct. So that's the big piece of authentication there. Launch point access is scoped properly. So if you have said inside of your creation of the API user, I do not want this person to have access to this part of Marketo, right? So you can test and make sure that the API user is scoped correctly. It doesn't have access that it shouldn't. And then understanding the payload. So that is saying, did the information that I get back from this request make sense? I want to see Chris Kelly's lead information. Is his age correct? Is his first name, last name correct? Does his email look correct? All of that. And then does the response look right? Am I able to have it or not? So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this tool to make sure that the information that you're looking for makes sense, that you're building your API correctly, that you're asking for the correct information. So that's actually a really useful way to understand the REST API and am I learning it correctly, hands-on, fool around with it a little bit. It really allows you to open the doors and get you started. So that's why I personally love Postman. There are other tools out there. I use Postman. It's what I'm comfortable with. So if you know a different way of doing it, feel free. A REST call is a REST call. Postman is just a way to get your hands on it and see what's going on. Charlie, would you like to provide anything?
Yeah, I just want to, Tyrone in the chat there has just called something incredibly important out. And this, Tyrone, this is where I've redacted some information. So you'd be sort of pleased to sort of see that up on the screen here. One of the great things that I love about Postman is it's a great playground. And this is really important when you're thinking about really getting your Marketo instance ready for AI and really getting the foundations right, okay? It's making you think about security, making you think about what keys are out there and how you can control them. When you are looking and to use and to get to know and play with that API in Postman, you can build environments. You can build an environment that stores all the information for you, but most important, it's also the place that where those access tokens can then get generated and stored in that environment. You're not putting it in necessarily into unique requests that you're saving to that Postman environment. you're not, as Taryn said here in the chat, publishing or making public in places like GitHub, for example, your details that will give the world access through the API to your instance. So it's incredibly important to be mindful of the security of your instance. And if you are in an enterprise, you might want to get in touch or work with your systems teams in just understanding the security and the risks around connecting something like Marketo to an external service or to an external GPT or LLM in order to understand the risks involved. And if you kick along the next slide, Taryn, that one thing to remember is always about access tokens. So, okay, so you got your client ID, you got that secret, you've created your user. Marketo is always refreshing that that access token. So whenever you're making a request in something like Postman or in an application, it needs to have a valid and up-to-date request. Now that's just an extra sort of layer of security for you there. Now, what we're going to do is actually take it up a step. And we've just talked about the foundations of API. Chris, you've just given us an explanation of what the API is, and we've given you some tips to go away and start practicing and getting used to it. What I want to do is actually look at using the API to start thinking about making those connections. So, Taryn, if you go to the next slide. Here we have sort of 4 main ways in order to make sort of connections between Marketo and an external service. We're going to talk about webhook in this next section. Webhooks are, if you guys are familiar, you can drop them into your smart campaigns in a flow, and that sends information in one call over to something like ChatGPT. And we'll go through that, won't we, in a minute, Chris? There's also middleware applications as well. Taryn is a great fan of Zapier, and if you want to sort of head over to Workflow Pro, he's got some sort of classes on how you can use the API with Zapier to handle requests. But there are others, Boomi, other iPasses, for example, that uses the API to connect with APIs and allow you to move information in and out of LLMs, as well as get and post information, which is Chris has gone through. And then also, finally here, Chris, you're going to talk about agents in just a minute. Now, agents are big for this year, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about how Adobe are using agents across their platforms. But actually, if you go to the next slide, Chris, I'd love you to talk about the work and examples that you've done in
absolutely
fancy tools.
So some of the bigger names out there, and why I love these 2 options of N8N and Replit, they really allow you to start activating your curiosity and just taking ideas into action immediately. It's really fantastic applications here. N8N is really designed to allow you to do automated processes, and they do it in a non-code way. So you're just using building blocks and putting them together. And the one tool that you can see there in the middle is the AI agent, where you don't have to create your own backend. You don't have to code anything. All of this is really there available for you. And you can put in your different models. So if you want to do it as a chat, so like if you have Anthropic, or you can put in ChatGPT or whatever you have access to. And then it allows you to, as an agent, say, agent, I want to give you this request, which is through the chat model, super hands-off, doesn't need to be hyper technical, and you can have that conversation. And then any type of tool that you give this agent access to, and in this case, we're doing an HTTP call or a REST API call, it will say, hey, I'm thinking you asked me to do a Marketo action. I have access to the Marketo API as part of my tool, and I'm going to go do it. You can do it all hands off. You can have a very high level conversation. You don't need to be technical at all. And it just allows you to just do what you want once you set up these small pieces. So super, super valuable tool. Very much a set it up and forget it situation. But again, always consider security with these things, because you have access to the castle, as Tyrone adequately put it. So just think through those capabilities. But once you have this type of power, it allows you to just set up things that are really annoying for you in your day-to-day work. Just allow an A2N to set up that automation process. And in this case, it says, hey, whenever I've done a chat, so you can connect it to, like your company chat or a Zoom or whatever you use. You can just say, hey, an A2N, do this. And it can reach off to Marketo if you've set it up correctly. So it's incredibly helpful. And then the other thing that I love is Replit. Replit is an application builder. So if you don't just have like a single action that you want to do for an automation, you can actually set up an entire application that will allow you to have whatever type of interface that you would like with Marketo. So for example, I know that Tyrone has a lot of experience with this. Yep, there he is in chat. I've built applications that allow me to do things like have a chat directly into Marketo that says, hey, I have a user that I need to find a user who clicked on X, Y, and Z emails within the past 15 days. Go find it for me, right? So you have so much power available to you. And the way that Replit allows you to do that is you can just talk to an AI agent and it will build it for you. It will ask for the information it needs from you to create an API request, to go into all types of automation and AI learning. So it is really phenomenal. I highly suggest looking more into these capabilities if that's something that is particularly of interest for you in your work cases or just curiosity. Charlie, is there anything you would like to add? Tyrone?
I've played around with tools like Relevance, and you mentioned it earlier, another tool called Make, where you can sort of connect these sort of multiple applications in order to train and do different things. Agents are fantastic. They're great. They're empowered to be able to get information, process that, handle it back in, and let another agent then do something with that information. It could then go off to another platform, something that will pass something or transform the data again or add to it, and then send it back into Marketo. So it's not just thinking about one-off jobs, but then it's also thinking about a whole workflow of things that you can do. You can automate a lot of your marketing operations in it. One thing that people might want to try, we talked about using Postman to just get started on APIs. Okay. But now we're going to just can you just take us quickly, Chris, and just talk about how we can get started with something like ChatGPT?
Yeah. So going into ChatGPT, you do need to have access within ChatGPT. So Chat is going to ask you to create an API key. So this is where you'll set up your account and see how much you're willing to use. There's cost associated per key value, so be aware of that. But essentially, this is where you're going to be able to find the same information that we were speaking about before within Marketo, but it's going to allow you to speak directly into ChatGPT. So once you've gone into, I forget the exact URL to get to the ChatGPT API, but if you type that in, it will get you down to the API here, create a new one, and then you'll have access to your key. And then you can see here on the names, there's a Zapier key, there's a sandbox, Marketo sandbox. So be pretty specific about what you're using that key for. And then you'll be able to use your authentication, your organization ID. This is your showing that I can speak to you and I am who I say I am. So this is where you get that information to plug it in to your API call. All right. Do you want to talk about webhook or do you want me to talk about webhook?
I would love to. Yeah. I love webhooks. I think they're really sort of great for that sort of point in time, a step in a flow step when you need to sort of send something and then you need that sort of information to come back. A webhook, you can create a webhook very simply within the admin section of your Marketo instance. So you do need to be an admin in your roles to be able to access that. You can create first of all, you need the details of the service that you are calling. Now, in the documentation with ChatGPT, there you need to add in your sort of service, and actually, if you just kick on one slide for me, there's some probably better details for you there. You need to create your URL, the service that you're going to be calling from your webhook. You then also need to give what's called a payload, and that's all the information that you need to pass across to the LLM that you are trying to reference. In this case, in the screenshot you can see here on the left-hand side, I'm calling OpenAI. So if you did want your API, I'll answer that question for you, Chris. If you wanted your OpenAI or ChatGPT API, you need to head over to OpenAI and then log into the API solution to generate that key. Now, in that payload, like with anything in Marketo, you can put in tokens, lead tokens, for example. It could be, for example, some information around a form fill. It could be someone's email address, maybe some activity data. It could be things that they put into the form that you need ChatGPT to check out for you to do things like validate whether they're a real person or not. So you putting that information into that payload using tokens and then calling it in a webhook within your flow, you're able to encapsulate all those tokens and then pass that across to ChatGPT. Now, it's important to be able to then be able to receive the response from your webhook. So what ChatGPT will do is then respond with the action or the summarization or the surmising of whether someone's valid or not back in a response to your webhook request. It's a bit like knocking on the door, open the door, and then getting a response from the person behind that door. ChatGPT will be passing that back to you. You need to map that into your Marketo instance. And we'll just talk about how you can actually map that back and actually some of the smart data model design decisions you can make for it. But like with all of what we've talked through here, you do need to authorize your request. So there are tokens. Now you need to get that token from your ChatGPT, and you'll be able to click on that. I did redact it in the previous slide, but you can add that into your custom header, which you also need to pass across. It's the keys again to your castle. So if you move on to the next slide. Now there is another way, and you guys might have heard of self-service flow steps in Marketo. Josh, another champion, talks a lot about self-service flow steps, and I love them. I love them too. They are fantastic. They allow you actually to take a lot more information that you get in that payload and then process that in your environment, in a developer environment. You can do lots of different things. And a little bit how Chris was explaining how the agents work in something like an NAN flow. A self-service flow step can process your data programmatically. So you can write a program to transform anything that you sort of pull into that sort of environment and then pass it back into multiple different sort of, in this case, field mappings. So here's a great use case already. I'm giving Karina some examples already early for being able to create an AI summary. Okay, you create lots of different interesting moments for a lead, what they've done, what pages they've seen on a website, what they've done in terms of what they've downloaded, as well as perhaps the forms they've filled in. You can use the self-service flow step to gather all of that information, pass across all of those interesting moments, and then concatenate them, and then use a GPT to then provide a very succinct summary, which you can then use for your sales team. Drop that summary here, for example, I've written or pulled in from the screen into an AI summary, and that you pass across to a sales email to let sales know exactly what's going on. So let's just return. Oh, go for it, Chris.
I was hoping, Charlie, if you could give us like a quick summation of the difference between a self-service flow step and a webhook, and like which one would excel in which direction. Because I know that there's quite a few questions out there of, hey, they're really similar, which one should I use, that type of thing.
Yeah, do you know what, Terence has put one in the chat, and for the sake of the recording here, I'll actually just talk about the timeouts. So webhook tend to have a 30-second timeout, right? And if you have a complex action, for example, if you are using ChatGPT as part of, say, AI summarization or to do some long compute or anything that does take a long time to process and get back to you, particularly if you want to save credits and use older models, by the way. It means that your webhook could potentially fail. Okay, self-service flow steps are great because it can wait for the response and then pass that response back into Marketo. So it does have a longer time to sort of process that back, which is really good for when you are running multiple flows within a flow step. You don't want that sort of program to come back with no return or to fail, particularly at something crucial like when you're handing leads over from Marketo into Salesforce. You want that salesperson to have that succinct sales generated summary. Now let's just talk about smart data models, and then what we're doing is actually just getting to the nub of how you guys can get ready using the API to get the foundations right for AI. So we've talked about the API, how you can get in there and how you can use it, what is it, how you can play with it. We've also talked about some of the models, some of the things you can do with it. What I want to talk about now, and what Chris is going to elaborate on by going into more sort of depth around those sort of different objects, is designing how that Marketo data how the data is stored when you receive it and how you use it and how you structure it. So Tryon, if you just kick along the slide here. For me, this is quite an important slide, and I quite like it because whenever I look at using Marketo with an external service, I always look at actually how that data is structured. I'm a data nerd. I like to know how it's used, how it's captured, but then also actually for what purpose, and then presenting it back into Marketo as part of a whole wider data ecosystem to know then how to surface that data back. Is it at the person and company level? Is that piece of information, does it need to be in a custom object or a custom activities? And I've just detailed the 3 parts here, and we'll kind of break those down in the next few minutes. So fields. So when you are mapping that data back out of ChatGPT, like for example, the AI summary that we've just looked at here, we want to, that data is going to come back and have a single value. It's going to have something that you can peg against that person record. If it was an account, for example, it could be perhaps a breakdown of what that company does in terms of the business. It could be an understanding of the tiering that they're in. Are they a large, medium, or small business? It could be something that you are pegging against an individual person or company object within your Marketo instance. And often it doesn't change that frequently. Okay, it could be, for example, understanding whether an email address is valid or not. Now that email address may become invalid in time if that person moves on or something changes with that, but generally it doesn't actually update on a regular basis. So whenever I think about using external services, cleaning and normalizing data, I'm thinking, is that belonging in a person field or a company field? Other than that, I'm thinking that, okay, is it belonging then in its own object? Is it, for example, its own product linked to a person or a company that's in my Marketo instance? Is it in subscription or even an event registration like a webinar? Does that level of activity need to be called out in a specific object, a specific table within Marketo linked to that person or company record? And that's important, particularly when you're using AI to transform data or to understand it or make sense of it. And then if you're doing that on a more regular basis, for example, analyzing how a company has multiple different subscriptions and perhaps looking at white space and what would be the next best action or something like, what an upgrade might look like against a company. That belongs on a custom object because you can bring that information alongside all of the product data that they have. And then the final one is the custom activities. And I quite like using these within Marketo. So you may see activities within the activity log on a person in Marketo, as for example, clicks an email or visitors a web page. Chris is going to show you in just a minute and just explain that you can build your own custom activities and build that into the activity log, and then use smart lists or smart campaigns to actually call on that information. Often it could be something like, some of the details I put here, it could be a demo, it could be a trial, it could be sales handoff. It could be making sense of what something that someone's done multiple times at a frequent basis. It details, first of all, a description of what's happened, and then, because we were able to timestamp that, when that happened as well, and that's great for timing exactly when the last thing that happened. Now, Chris, I'd love you for the next sort of few, just to explain actually how you build those and loop that back into perhaps AI.
Absolutely. So again, all of this is located on some documentation that goes through step by step. It has even more visuals to allow you to understand where in Marketo how to obtain and build these things. So this is just a super high level, how do I go about it from here. But inside of admin, you can create your custom activity, provide the name, a description. Usually I provide this for people to come in and understand what's going on who aren't a part of it, or when it's being sent to someone else, they can have a better understanding of what data you're looking at. And then crucially, the API name. So this is how the individual activity can be found using an API call. So it all comes back around, how are we getting this access? How are we getting this information? Reporting, anything like that. So the API name needs to be customized, and it cannot be shared throughout. It needs to be a unique name. So then define your filter and trigger labels. So these become like essentially a smart list item, where you can say on the right-hand side when you're building your flow steps and things, what do I want to trigger against? What do I want to have the filter look for? What am I looking for this custom activity? This is where you put it in. Primary field name comes next. It represents your activity, what it is. This shows up inside the activity log. So when you're searching through, you know what it is. So try and be descriptive yet short. Just the same way that you're looking through all the activities. If you have a specific pet peeve, now's your time to change it. Huzzah. And then once you've gone through that process, you can approve, and then you have to publish it. If you don't, it will not show up. So just making sure that you're going through that. You can use these activities as a draft beforehand, but again, approved must happen, otherwise you won't see it. So we go on the next page. So now that I've created a custom activity, what do I do with it? How can I go through with it? I know that we were kind of quick beforehand, but I really wanted to show this as pretty straightforward with the URL, how you go in and how you actually ask for that specific activity. So this part is the access request. So this is going to be similar to any type of call. It doesn't matter if it's activity or anything. Custom activity or get requests for leads, you still need to have credentials. So this is why I'm calling it out really clearly here. The _client_ID is where you put in your content. If you've never seen this type of nomenclature before, that is specifically to your instance. So once you get that key, it'll give you that access token. Go on to the next one. And then this is where you're actually using API to interact with that custom activity. So in this case, list custom activity types that I have, right? So I'm doing a get call, and then here is the Munchkin ID, like Charlie was talking about before. The Munchkin ID is saying, I am talking about my specific instance. If you have Charlie's Munchkin ID, you could attempt to call Charlie's Marketo instance, but if you're not authorized, it'll say, no, you don't have authorization, so it needs to be yours. But then you're seeing inside of the URL /rest/activities. So you're specifically saying, I want to have action against my custom activities. and then it's saying external types. So again, if you want to know the exact URL that you need to put in, the documentation is going to tell you, it's going to inform you, educate you on the different capabilities that you have. This is just an example. So I'm asking for all of the activity types that I have built in my Marketo instance, and boom, here you go. And then you can describe a specific type. So give me the description. Again, these are just examples, right? So there's so many different options that you can do of give me all of the activity types associated to Chris. Give me all the activity types I have in my instance. Give me just the custom activity that I just created, or give me all of the activities of person fill out form. You know, all of these things are available to you based off of your use case and what you need to do. And again, you need to have specific information for specific requests. So in this case, you need to have an API name and an ID. You want a specific Chris Kelly. You need to know Chris Kelly's ID in order to find him, things like that. And all of that is really broken down for you inside of the documentation here. So I would love to go into huge amounts of detail to describe everything that you need to know, but the documentation is key for this. This is just a way to get you started, where to look first. We go on to the next one. I'm talking about how do you create a custom object. So custom objects are a bit more detailed. They're a bit bigger objects themselves inside of Marketo. And it allows you to specify the key information here, your display name, again, your API name, your primary key. So this uniquely identifies each record. You can think of these custom objects as like a separate database table, because that's how Marketo sees it. And each Marketo table needs to have its own unique ID and a link field. So the link field is also a really big one. It connects your object to the person. So in many cases, it's the email, because Marketo considers email the unique identifier. So I have 25 different products. I need to connect it specifically to Chris. This ID field this link field is very important. So I've created a couple of custom objects by accident without a link field, and it doesn't work out well for you. So don't do that. But yeah, so here are the required setup pieces. And then you can add whatever fields you need. So a SKU number, a price, a product description, you know, like everything that you need to know inside of Marketo to allow you to do your marketing capabilities. So add that information here. Mark your primary ID, so primary key field, and mark your dedupe so you don't have multiple of the same object, that type of thing. Again, a lot of documentation that can go through this. And then once you've had your creation of the object, prove it, and it will be available for you. And then you guys know the drill. First thing you have to do is get your authentication, allow you to access your API calls. And then here's an example: retrieve the custom objects associated to a particular person. Here's that API call. So doing your API name, so that's your Munchkin ID. And then you can say, I want all the values associated to this person. So you can go through, you can see the API call. Again, the documentation is here, but really it's trying to give you the understanding of, hey, all of this is available to you in Marketo. You can have access to all of it. These are some of the steps that you need to go through in order to get there, but it's going to be unique per instance. And then once you've decided what you need to do, the documentation, you just need to look it up inside of Experience League. It's super simple. They have search capabilities that will allow you to narrow it down. If you're still having issues, I'm sure that many of the champs would be happy to help you if you reach out to us. There's a bunch of tutorials online. I am self-taught through just going through and reading documentation, looking at YouTube videos. If you have questions about API as a whole, there's a whole bunch of videos out there that will help you go through it. I know Tyrone has written so many blog posts and he has a lot of content. Picking on him since he's here on the call, but there's so many makers out there that have a lot of content. So don't feel bad or overwhelmed about certain things. Hey, I'm not getting it. Once you start playing around and get your hands in there and get your few successful calls going at first, it'll start clicking, I promise. So please feel free to reach out and just search for additional content wherever it's focused. So
Thanks.
I pass it back to Charlie.
Thanks, Chris. So we've got we've been through the basics here, right? So we understand what the API is and how we're using it. We've talked about how we can use sort of AI. Now let's just, for the last few minutes of this webinar, just have a look at some of the tasks that you can use and how you can sort of use it. So I'm going to canter through these examples, but I would love you in the chat just to put in your own use cases for AI. I would love to see this here and see those examples. Now, I'm a big Microsoft user, okay? Full disclosure. And we talked about OpenAI, but I want to sort of talk a bit quickly about Power Automate and Copilot. It's particularly good if you're in an enterprise situation because that is there possibly ready for you to use. So again, you're able to connect your Marketo to forms, to pass information across, process that in OpenAI, and sort of pull things back. So if you just click along to the next slide, Tarun, for me, please. You can use that, those sort of easy low-code builders just to work those workflows in those things to do some simple things. And if you go to the next slide for me, we can have a look at normalization of data. It's a big one. We all spend a lot of time in our Marketo instance just trying to make sure that we've got a clean and effective data that we can use. For example, I have in the past used Copilot to take countries from form fills or ISO names and then just normalize that ready for my CRM instance. I'm from Wales in England, okay, but Wales in our CRM is not within the pick list. So what we do is, or what Copilot does, is recognize the different regions and, for example, with the United Kingdom, and turn Wales into United Kingdom. Same with things like USA, changes that to an ISO US. And when it comes to things like job titles, I mean, there's every day on LinkedIn, I keep seeing brand new job titles being created, which is a nightmare when you're trying to categorize them into particular ICP or even sort of job function seniorities. An LLM, such as a Copilot or ChatGPT, can then make sense of that and then sort of push that through. If we move on to the next one for me, please. And we're sort of going through different levels of difficulty here because another one that I like to use is also a fit. So an ICP, ideal customer profile. So that's what sales are looking for. So they are wanting to receive a lead and they want to know that lead is exactly the lead that they want to be working and then converting. So using, obviously scoring is great, but sometimes it's not enough. You can actually use AI to evaluate all of the different signals, all the different hand raises to understand alongside their demographic and the firmographic of that company person, whether they are a good fit for that. Again, that's great to sort of push that back in along with the AI summaries that I talked about. Tyrone, if you were able to kick along as well to the next one. Now, this is one I really like. Okay, it's one that I'm currently using and working on at the moment. And this does use a little bit of self-service flow step, but what you can do using that API is use external services to reference your Marketo instance and then do simple tasks, but within environments like Teams, for example. So you're working in a Microsoft environment and you won't need to very quickly.
Tyrone, can you please mute yourself?
Okay.
Your typing sample, thank you.
If you very quickly want to spin up a program or upload a list, for example, you can use the power of AI in order to be able to take a list, run that list through a cleaner, make sure that all of the values on that list are valid, capitalize letters where they need to be capitalized, or normalize those where it needs to be normalized, or even pull out all of the bad ones. So email addresses that just fail validation, pull that out and then hand that back to you, or give you that analysis back in the chat of Teams. It's great using that API to be able, and an AI to be able to push and pull that information out, and then really work for you in the background to save you time, save you energy, and then also give you more sort of focus to get on and do your day jobs. Now, Taryn, if you just kick along here. Now, we've just talked about and given you use cases around exactly what you can connect Marketo up to. I want to just talk about actually very quickly what Adobe are doing. And a lot of it is actually inbuilt. I've asked to sort of for you guys to share in the chat some of your examples. Adobe are this year, I'm really excited to sort of see what Adobe are innovating, and also bringing AI into the platform to make us actually bring us forward to be AI ready. So let's just quickly get through what they're doing this year. So AI agents are coming across all of the platform, across the experience platform within Marketo, and I'm seeing them everywhere, including Marketo. It's in right across all of the different sort of platforms, and it's really focused on data, journey orchestration, and really providing you revenue intelligence to make clear decisions. Now, if you go into the next slide, in Marketo, what we have seen is now Marketo is becoming more intelligent. We're able to move faster with a lot of the AI-powered features that are being brought in. For every use case that Chris and I are coming up with, we're starting to actually see them come through into Marketo already. So if you go into the next one, we can very quickly see what's already there. So we already have the ability now with predictive audiences and predictive content. That's been around for some time. But what we are seeing, for example, in the new email designer, is the ability to have email AI content generated for you. There's now Firefly, so we can have images created there, as well as an interactive webinars, which I personally love. You can even create or have Adobe AI create a blog summary for you. So afterwards, you don't need to run that through and after the webinar is finished, then get an external OpenAI service to translate and transcribe and then make sense and then write you a blog. Adobe's already done that by the time actually that webinar has finished. So if you go through the next slide, and now these slides are going to be available afterwards, and I would love you actually everyone to just kind of go through and see everything here. So I've talked about the new email designer and the authoring assistant. Taryn, if you go to the next one, there's generative content in emails. I would love to see this year the landing page builder or a new landing page builder have some of these sort of features in there. But one thing I do like is in the new email designer is the ability to take flat images, and that can create email templates for you within Marketo already. So if you go to the next one. Images, if you've ever sat in front of an email that you need to get out, and you either need that banner image or you need an image that sort of calls to action that meets with your brand, you can actually sort of generate that from within Marketo now using Adobe Express powered by Adobe Firefly to create those images for you. And Taryn, if you go to the next one. And I've already talked about this one. I absolutely love it. And the other part of this is also chaptering as well. So you're able to sort of divide up those webinars. If you go if you go to this one here, I've already talked about the generative AI content. One use case as well that I've used in the past is next best actions for sales in live chat. Adobe have come out and have replaced that, and now you have the ability to create that or auto create that using Adobe AI responses to live chat and questions on your website. And then finally, if you guys have heard or seen sort of either an Experience League or seen out there coming in roadmap, Adobe qualification agent even things like AI summaries, Adobe are ahead of that as well. So Adobe now are developing the ability to pull information out of Marketo as well as in CRM, and pull things like down from places like Demandbase, and then combine and create those AI summaries. So we even, Chris, examples of that we should be sharing to be able to, you know, pull down and you know, use agents to process all this stuff. Adobe are already providing it for us now. So I'm really excited by the future that that we're seeing coming out of Adobe right now.
As champions, we have the unique privilege of seeing a little bit ahead of time what they're doing, and it's really, really, really exciting to see what's going on. If we could, I know we're at time here. Thank you all for sticking with us, but we do have some resources that we were talking through the remainder of this call here. There's a lot of information out there about getting stronger further, going on Experience League, really learning in depth, not just getting started. But if you're really curious, learning more, there's a lot of information out on Experience League, free and accessible, allowing you to really advance yourself on any projects that you're looking forward to do. So if we continue on here.
Chris, this is my favorite. If you do get into Experience League, check out playlists. Playlists allow you to curate your own content, get inspired by articles, and also watch videos. There is some curated ones already, and there is an AI playlist from Adobe there. So do get in there, understand what their future of AI is. There's also some great content and videos around API, and also connecting those with Marketo. And
Thank you, Charlie. I know people are dropping. One last thing I want to say, I'm sorry we didn't leave enough time for questions and everything, but if you have questions, please email us. We'll be happy to respond to them, or hold on to them for the next Marketo Champion office hours. Bring all those questions to office hours. They'd be happy to talk about them and get into much more of that communication. So again, sorry for not having any time for live questions. I know Tyrone was doing fantastic answering as they came up. Fingers of swiftness there.
Sorry about the keyboard.
No worries. But thank you, Karina, so much for getting us going. Again, please reach out with any questions, email, and this should be presented out to you guys as well. Please take a look. There was information we couldn't get to and speak to specifically. But thank you all so much for joining.
Nice. Next office hours is February 12th. It's a Thursday, I believe, 2 weeks' time.
Fantastic.
Awesome, awesome. So I guess you guys
All
can
right.
look out
Thank you all.
for the assets we'll be sending over soon. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks, folks.